April 1917. A curtained train crosses from Germany into Russia by night, carrying one man. Within months, that man will command a country of over 100 million people. You will see how a provincial family and a hanged brother built the man in this carriage, by document, by date. 47 years earlier, in 1870, in Simbirsk, a civil servant's wife bore her third child, Vladimir Ulyanov. His father inspected schools for the province and earned a rank granting the family hereditary nobility. At the Simbirsk Gymnasium, the boy topped every class and took the school's gold medal on graduation. His older brother Alexander, 6 years ahead of him, was the family's other prodigy, bound for St. Petersburg University. In St. Petersburg, Alexander joined a student circle plotting to kill Tsar Alexander III with a bomb. The plot was betrayed before the bomb was ever used. Arrested in March 1887, Alexander stood trial and refused to name a single conspirator. The sentence came down that May, read aloud in open court: death by hanging. Alexander Ulyanov was hanged at Schlisselburg Fortress on the 8th of May, 1887, at age 21. In Simbirsk, 17-year-old Vladimir learned of the execution from a newspaper, not a telegram. Former friends began crossing the street to avoid the house. A hanged conspirator made the family name a liability. Asked what he thought of the plot, Vladimir is recorded as saying only, "We will not go that way. We will go another way." That autumn, police in Kazan opened their own file on the graduate who now carried his brother's name. The file opened after his brother's execution followed him to Kazan University. Expelled within a year. Barred from every lecture hall in the empire, he prepared for the law exams alone, as an external candidate. 4 years of isolation ended in 1891. The board ranked him first among every candidate that year. A perfect law degree from a man whose surname was already flagged in a police file. The law never became his trade. The diploma went straight onto a shelf. Within months, he was reading Marx aloud in factory back rooms to small circles of workers instead. These krushki, small underground study circles, drilled factory hands in theory, the way he once drilled statutes. By 1895, he had merged those circles into one network, the League of Struggle for the Working Class. The network lasted less than a year. Informants had mapped it already. Arrests began that December. He spent 14 months in a St. Petersburg cell before a sentence was even read to him. The 1897 verdict sent him into Siberian exile, 3 years in a village called Shushenskoy. Nadezhda Krupskaya, arrested in the same network, requested exile to the same village. They married there in July. Exile gave him something prison never had: a desk and years of uninterrupted quiet. There he drafted his argument. Revolution needed not a mass movement, but a disciplined party of professionals. The degree that ranked first in the empire had become an advocate's discipline, redirected into conspiracy. The exile ends in 1900, with the decision made: leave Russia and build the weapon he cannot build inside. The exile ended in 1900. Ulyanov crossed into Germany instead of going home. He needed no speech. He needed a newspaper small enough to smuggle across a border. In Munich that year, he co-founded a newspaper, Iskra, the Spark. Copies were sewn into coat linings, hidden in book bindings, packed under false crates bound for Russian ports. The paper reached Marxist cells across the empire and gave them one shared argument. 2 years later, in 1902, he published a pamphlet. The movement needed fewer members, better trained. The pamphlet's title was a question: what is to be done? His answer? A small, disciplined vanguard of professional revolutionaries, not an open mass movement. Not every socialist agreed. Some called it control dressed up as strategy. The argument would not stay on paper for long. A pamphlet had become a fault line. The next test would be a vote, not a debate. In the summer of 1903, delegates gathered in London for the party's second Congress. On a procedural vote over party membership rules, his faction won a narrow majority. From that single vote, his faction took a name: Bolsheviks, the majority. At this same Congress, he began signing articles with a new alias, Lenin. The minority walked out, calling themselves Mensheviks. The split was no longer theory. A name, a faction, a pseudonym for its leader. No country would let any of them operate in the open. A name and a faction now existed. The country they needed still would not let them in. For the next 12 years, home was a rented room in someone else's city. Geneva, then Krakow, then Zurich. The address changed. The work never did. Krupskaya ran the correspondence. Coded letters, invisible ink between the lines of family news. In 1905, revolution finally broke out across Russia. Strikes, a mutiny, a czar forced to concede a parliament. He reached Petersburg late, and the uprising was already being crushed by the time he arrived. By 1907, he was back in exile. In Krakow, close enough to the Russian border to smuggle newspapers across it, he kept the party alive from a rented flat. His faction argued constantly with rival socialists, over tactics, funding, even the wording of resolutions. Then, in the summer of 1914, Europe went to war, and socialists across the continent lined up behind their own governments. He took the opposite position. Russia's defeat, not its victory, would serve the revolution. Fellow socialists called it treason to their own soldiers. He kept arguing it anyway, meeting after meeting. Wartime Zurich pressed in close, neutral, watchful, and short on money. He read, wrote, and waited in a rented room above a sausage shop, tracking the war in newspapers days old by the time they reached him. In January 1917, he told a Zurich meeting of young socialists that he might not live to see the revolution himself. Weeks later, in Petrograd, the Tsar abdicated. The man whose theories predicted it was stuck behind enemy lines with no way home. The exile could not go home. Berlin's foreign ministry wanted Russia broken and had a train for the job. Parvis arranged the passage and the funds. He wanted a peace treaty. Berlin wanted Russia gone from the war. In April 1917, the train crossed into Finland, then Petrograd. No one had told him what waited. Finland Station, searchlights, a naval band, thousands of workers who had never seen his face. He climbed onto the armored car. No thanks for the welcome. A demand: end the war, topple the government. Within days, he wrote 10 points, the April Theses: no support for the government, all power to the Soviets. Even his own party called the theses reckless at first. He printed them anyway. By autumn, Kerensky's government was losing the streets. Bread lines grew. Soldiers deserted by the thousand. Inside the Smolny Institute, once a girls' school, Trotsky's Petrograd Soviet drilled armed committees. On the night of October 25th, old style, the Bolsheviks moved. Bridges, telegraph, the state bank. By the 26th, the Winter Palace had fallen. Kerensky fled. The Bolsheviks held Petrograd. He had run study circles and printed pamphlets for 2 decades. Now he chaired a government. But the war had not stopped. German troops advanced, and the new government had promised to end it. In March 1918, at Brest-Litovsk, his delegation signed away vast Russian territory. His own party called it betrayal. He argued the state needed breathing room, not pride. In August 1918, Fanny Kaplan fired 3 shots at a Moscow factory. 2 bullets lodged in him. Surgeons closed the wound around 1 bullet near his collarbone. The state was his now. So was the damage. 2 bullets stayed in his body. The state he had just built started failing him back almost at once. Civil war had already split the country by 1918. Reds against whites, front lines redrawn by the month. To hold power, his government answered with the Cheka's Red Terror, mass arrests, executions without trial. Then came the requisitioning. War communism ordered peasant grain seized by force to feed cities on the front. By 1921, the Volga region had no grain left to seize. Drought met a countryside already stripped bare. Famine spread across the Volga through 1921 and into 1922. Millions died. The number is still argued over. The outcome was not. The price of the war he chose to win, paid by the countryside, not the Kremlin. In May 1922, his own body turned on him. A first stroke left one arm and leg weakened. He fought his way back to partial speech and partial movement through the summer, dictating notes in short bursts. A second stroke struck in December 1922, taking most of the movement on his right side. Confined but still lucid, between December and January he began dictating to a stenographer in short daily sessions. The document became known as his testament, a warning that Joseph Stalin, as General Secretary, had gathered too much power in his hands. The precise legal mind that once passed its bar exams with top marks now had to fight for every dictated sentence. A third stroke followed in March 1923. It left him paralyzed and unable to speak at all. He could still hear every word read to him. He could no longer add one of his own. After his death, party leadership, Stalin among them, kept the testament from wide circulation, reading it only to a closed session. The man who once out-argued every rival in the party could no longer speak one warning, and the men it named were the only ones still reading his mail. The men reading his mail did not have to wait long. The warning about Stalin was never spoken aloud again, not by its author. On January the 21st, 1924, at the Gorky estate outside Moscow, Vladimir Ulyanov died. He was 53. Krupskaya later said her husband had asked, plainly, to be buried beside his mother in Petrograd. No monument, no spectacle. The Politburo overruled the family. The body would not go into the ground at all. Chemists embalmed the corpse for permanent display, a technique built for this body alone and refined for decades after. A wooden mausoleum went up on Red Square within weeks. A granite one replaced it within a decade. Millions filed past the glass case in the decades that followed, a pilgrimage the state itself organized. The city where he'd once arrived by sealed train did not stay Petrograd for long. Within days, the Petrograd Soviet renamed the city Leningrad, sealing that journey into the map. The testament he'd dictated a year earlier still existed, though the party had buried it from public print. It was read once, to a closed party session, then withheld from Soviet print for 3 decades. It surfaced in the Soviet press in the late 1980s, decades after those men it warned against had died. The mind that topped its class in St. Petersburg law exams spent its final months unable to finish one sentence. The state built by that mind's calculated decisions did not die with him. It lasted nearly 70 years. Historians still argue the ledger of war, terror, and famine. Will they ever agree on the final number? The body is still on Red Square as this is recorded. So, the record's in order now. What do you make of it? That's the record. What you make of it is yours.